You know what's funny? Everyone's been asking the same question for weeks now. Are they coming? Will Harry see his dad? Will Meghan show up? Will the palace let them in? Will William be in the same room? And I get it. Those are the obvious questions. But I've been thinking about a different one. One that I haven't really heard anyone ask out loud. And once you hear it, I promise you, everything else starts to make sense. The question isn't whether they're coming to the UK. They are. That's basically confirmed now. The question is, do Harry and Meghan actually want the same thing from this trip? Because here's the thing. When two people travel together, we assume they're going for the same reason. Same destination, same purpose, same result they're hoping for. That's how it works, right? But what if it doesn't? What if two people are sitting on the same plane, heading to the same country, walking into the same rooms, and they want completely different things from every single moment of it? That's what I think is happening here. And I think that gap, that quiet, invisible gap between what Harry needs from this trip and what Meghan needs from it, explains basically everything that has felt strange or confusing or contradictory about this story for the past several months. So let's talk about it. Not like a courtroom, not like a verdict, just like two people sitting somewhere quiet, late at night, trying to actually understand what's going on. Because honestly, I think this is sadder and more human than most people are giving it credit for. Let's start with Harry. And I mean really start with him. Not the Harry who gives interviews. Not the Harry who wrote a memoir. Not the Harry who appears in Netflix documentaries talking about his mental health journey. I mean the person underneath all of that. A son. His father has cancer. That's not a tabloid detail. That's not a narrative beat. That's a man watching his parent, a complicated parent, an emotionally distant parent, a parent who maybe never gave him quite what he needed, watching that person get sick, and knowing that the clock is different now. There's a specific kind of grief that comes before the actual loss. Anticipatory grief, therapists call it. It's when you start mourning someone who is still there, and it's brutal in a way that's hard to explain if you haven't felt it. Because you're not grieving a memory, you're grieving the future. You're grieving all the conversations you haven't had yet, all the moments you kept postponing because you thought there was more time. I think that's where Harry is. And the thing that makes this even heavier is the specific history between him and Charles. This isn't a warm, uncomplicated father-son relationship where the only obstacle is geography. There are years of emotional distance, years of Harry feeling like he came second to the institution, second to William, second to what the crown needed in any given moment. He said as much. In the book, in interviews, in the way he talks about his childhood when he forgets to be diplomatic about it. And yet, he keeps reaching out. He came to London when Charles was diagnosed. He stayed for less than an hour and then flew back. He's made quiet overtures that never seem to land, or at least never seem to lead anywhere lasting. Why would someone keep doing that? Because he's a son. And sons, even hurt ones, even angry ones, even ones who have every justification to stay away, they still want their fathers. That desire doesn't go away just because the relationship is broken. Sometimes it gets stronger precisely because it's broken. Because you're always hoping this time it goes differently. This time something shifts. This time you get the version of the conversation you've been waiting for your whole life. Insiders have been pretty consistent about this. It's Harry who pushed for this visit. Harry who initiated contact. Harry who wants to bring his kids, Archie and Lilibet, and let Charles meet his grandchildren properly, maybe for the first time, in a way that feels real rather than staged. Think about what that means. He wants his children to know their grandfather. He wants that connection to exist before it can't exist anymore. That's not a PR calculation. That's not a brand decision. That's just a person trying to hold something together before it slips away. And here's what I find genuinely moving about it, even if no one's really naming it that way. Harry is willing to be uncomfortable. He's willing to walk back into a place that hurt him. He's willing to accept terms that probably feel humiliating to some degree. Staying in a royal residence on the palace's invitation, operating under their security arrangements, existing inside a structure that he left, loudly and publicly, just a few years ago. He's willing to do all of that, not because he surrendered, but because some things matter more than being right. And the fact that this trip is even happening, after everything, says something about what he's willing to sacrifice to have a few real days with his father. That's the Harry who's getting on that plane. Now, hold that image in your mind for a second, because we're about to talk about someone with a very different kind of baggage. If you've been following this channel for a while, you know I don't do the thing where I just paint Meghan as a villain and Harry as a victim. It's lazy, it's not actually true, and it's boring. There are 100 channels doing that, and they all sound exactly the same after about 30 seconds. But I do think there's something important to understand about Meghan's position right now. And it requires being honest about what her life in America actually looks like in 2026. The brand is struggling. That's not a rumor. That's the pattern you see when you look at what's happening. The Netflix deals haven't produced the cultural moment they were supposed to. The lifestyle brand, as ever, launched with a wave of attention, and then, what? The follow-through hasn't matched the ambition. The partnerships have been quieter than expected. The deals that were rumored haven't materialized the way people anticipated. And Meghan is smart. Whatever else you think about her, she's extremely perceptive about image. She understands narrative. She understands how perception works, how media cycles work, how a single, well-timed appearance can shift the story. So put yourself in her position for a moment. You've been living in California. You've been building a brand based partly on this idea that you were pushed out of the royal family, that you were treated unfairly, that you were a woman they couldn't handle, that the institution rejected you because you were too modern, too outspoken, too American, too real. That's a powerful story. A lot of people believe it. A lot of people connected with it. But stories have a shelf life, and the way you refresh a story, the way you prove it's still true, still relevant, still worth caring about, is with a new chapter. What's a better new chapter than going back? Think about it from a pure narrative standpoint. Meghan Markle returns to the United Kingdom, the country that she says rejected her, the family that she says failed her. And she walks in, not begging, not apologetic, not diminished, but present, visible, with her children, on her terms, documented and shared. That's not reconciliation, that's a statement. And the cameras will be there. Maybe not inside, maybe not officially, but the cameras are always there. The street photos, the arrival images, the speculation and the commentary and the social media posts. Every outlet in the world will be covering this trip, which means every image from it becomes content. Every appearance is an asset. As ever benefits from this. Her social platforms benefit from this. The general perception of her as someone who was cast out and is now returning on her own terms, that whole architecture gets reinforced. She doesn't need to say anything explicitly. She doesn't need to give a press conference. The act itself tells the story she wants told. And here's the critical difference from Harry. Harry wants this trip to be private, or as private as it can possibly be, given who they are. He wants real time with his father. He wants his kids to connect with their grandfather. He wants something that doesn't have a camera attached to it. Meghan's version of a successful trip, almost by definition, requires visibility. That's not a character flaw. That's a strategic reality. She has built something that depends on public perception, and public perception is fed by public moments. You can't run the kind of brand she's running in total silence. It doesn't work that way. But when one person needs the trip to be quiet and the other needs it to be seen, you have a problem. And that problem is exactly what we're going to talk about in the next part. Because the specific places where Harry's needs and Meghan's needs collide on this trip, they're more concrete than you might think. And one of them involves an offer from the palace that should have been a simple yes, and instead produced something much more telling. Stay with me. So let's talk about the collision points, because this is where it gets really specific. And specific is where the truth lives. The first one, and probably the clearest, is the palace residence offer. King Charles, through whatever back channels these things move through, extended an invitation for Harry and Meghan to stay at a royal residence during the visit. Not a hotel. Not a rented property somewhere outside London. A royal residence, on palace grounds essentially. Now think about what that offer means on two different levels. For Harry, it's almost everything he could have asked for. It's proximity, it's access. It's a signal from his father that says, you're still family. You can still come home. The door isn't closed. For a man who has spent years trying to navigate his way back to some version of a relationship with his father, That offer is not a small thing. It's an outstretched hand. He wants to take it. But for Meghan, that same offer looks completely different. Accepting the palace's hospitality means operating inside their structure. It means being on their territory, on their schedule, under their roof. It means the story of the visit gets framed, at least partially, by the institution, not by her. And for someone who has spent years building a narrative about leaving that institution on her own terms, about not needing their validation, about standing independently, walking back through those doors as a guest feels like it undermines the whole thing. It's not that she's wrong to feel that way. There's a real tension there. Accepting could look like capitulation. Staying somewhere else maintains the image of independence, of not being absorbed back into the machine they so publicly walked away from. But here's what that silence communicates to everyone watching. When the palace makes a gesture, a real, tangible gesture of welcome, and the response is ambiguity, delay, and ultimately quiet rejection, it tells a story. Not a story Meghan is writing, a story that writes itself. And the people who notice it most are the ones in Harry's corner, the ones who want to see this reconciliation happen. Because they see a man who wants to accept, held in place by a situation that won't let him. That's the first collision. The second one is about what a successful trip looks like when it's over. For Harry, success is invisible. Success is a few real days with his father, a proper dinner, his kids running around somewhere in England while Charles watches. Maybe a conversation, a real one, not a diplomatic one, where something that's been left unsaid for years finally gets said. Nothing on camera, nothing that ends up anywhere. Just the private reality of a family that found its way back to something resembling itself. That's what he's flying toward. For Meghan, a trip with zero public presence is a missed opportunity at best and a problem at worst. If they arrive, spend a week in total privacy, and leave without a single visible moment, the narrative doesn't shift, the brand doesn't get refreshed. The image of her as someone who returned on her own terms, confident, unbowed, present, never gets created because there's no evidence of it. It happened, but it might as well not have. So there's a negotiation happening, probably not explicitly, probably not as a conversation that starts with, "I need public appearances and you don't." These things rarely get named that clearly, but in every decision about the trip, where they stay, what they attend, who they're photographed with, what gets shared on her Instagram, those two different visions of what this trip is for are pulling in opposite directions. And Harry, if the people who know him are right, is the one who keeps finding himself caught between what he came for and what the trip keeps becoming. There's a third collision, and it's maybe the quietest one, but I think it's the deepest. Harry's version of this trip requires vulnerability. It requires showing up without armor. It requires being willing to be seen as the one who came back, the one who wanted it, the one who needed it enough to come back under conditions that aren't entirely on his terms. There's a kind of emotional exposure in that, a willingness to be, at least for a moment, just a son who misses his father. That vulnerability is hard to perform for cameras. It doesn't translate well into content. It doesn't make a strong image. It's the kind of thing that gets diluted the moment someone's thinking about how it looks. And Meghan's presence, not because she's a bad person, but because of what her presence requires in a public context, makes that vulnerability harder to access. Because when you're thinking about optics, about narrative, about the story that gets told afterward, you can't also be fully present in the room. You can't be in two places at once. And Harry is being asked, implicitly, to be in two places at once. To have a private emotional experience and a public narrative moment simultaneously. To be a son and a character in someone else's content strategy at the same time. I don't think that's sustainable. And I don't think it's working. Which brings us to the question that I keep coming back to, the one I want to leave you with, because I think it matters more than anything else we've talked about tonight. Here's what I think is going to happen. They're going to arrive. There will be photos, maybe not official ones, maybe not posed ones, but photos. There always are. Archie and Lilibet will be somewhere in England, and that alone will generate a week's worth of coverage. Harry will see his father. Something will happen in that room that none of us will ever know about, which is as it should be. Meghan will be visible in exactly the right amount, enough to register, not so much that it looks calculated. They'll attend whatever they attend, and then they'll fly back to California. And the headlines will say, reconciliation, progress, the rift is healing, a new chapter. And maybe some of that will even be true. But here's the thing I can't stop thinking about. What happens on the plane ride home? Not the public version, not the statement their team puts out, not the photos that get selected and posted in the days after. I mean the actual human experience of two people sitting next to each other, somewhere over the Atlantic, having just spent a week wanting different things from every single moment. Does Harry feel like he got what he came for? Did he get enough real time with his father? Unmediated? Unperformed? Just the two of them in a room being honest? Or did the trip keep sliding towards something else? Something more managed, more visible, more useful to a story he wasn't trying to tell? Does Meghan feel like the trip landed the way she needed it to? Did the public moment happen? Did the image get created? Did the narrative shift in the direction she needed it to? Or did the pressure to keep things private, to honor Harry's needs, to not be seen as the one who turned a family visit into a media event, did that pressure cost her something? I don't know the answers. Neither do you. Neither does anyone who isn't in that relationship. But here's what I do know. When two people consistently want different things from the same experiences, not dramatically different, not in ways that lead to screaming arguments, but quietly, persistently different in ways that never quite get resolved, that gap doesn't stay the same size. It grows. Slowly, invisibly, in ways that are almost impossible to point to until one day the distance is undeniable. I've seen it. You've probably seen it. Maybe you've lived it. It doesn't require anyone to be the villain. It doesn't require betrayal or cruelty or some dramatic rupture. It just requires two people who love each other but keep needing opposite things from the same moments. And neither of them quite knowing how to say that out loud. And both of them hoping, every time, that this trip, this event, this conversation will be the one where it finally feels like they're actually going the same direction. That's what makes this sadder than any scandal. Scandals are clean. Someone does something wrong, someone gets hurt, the story has a shape. This doesn't have a shape. This is just two people on a plane, heading somewhere together, for reasons that have almost nothing in common. And if you've been watching this story, and something about it keeps nagging at you, keeps feeling slightly off in a way you can't quite articulate, I think that's what you're sensing. Not manipulation, not conspiracy, not some carefully orchestrated deception. Just two people who might have wanted each other, but who might have also, somewhere along the way, stopped wanting the same life. That's the question I'll leave you with tonight. Not whether they're coming to the UK. Not whether William will be in the room. Not whether the palace forgives them or they forgive the palace. But this: when two people share a life but not a direction, what are they actually building together? Think about that. And if it made you think of something in your own life, your own relationships, your own moments of wanting different things from the same experience, drop it in the comments. Not about Harry and Meghan, about you, because I have a feeling this landed somewhere real for a lot of you tonight. And if you're new here, this is what we do. We don't pick sides. We don't hand out verdicts. We just try to understand people. Subscribe if that sounds like something you want more of. There's a lot more coming. I'll see you in the next one.